Okay, welcome to the Air Pollution Control Board on January 13th. And I'll ask that we have roll call, please.
Board Member Bennett.
Here.
Board Member Foy. Here. Board Member Long.
Here.
Board Member Morgan.
Here.
Board Member Pollock.
Here.
Board Member Ramirez.
Here.
Board Member Sharkey. Present. Board Member Tucker.
Present.
Board Member Zaragoza.
Good, how are you?
And Board Member Parks.
A lot better.
Present. Board Member Ramirez, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. Put your hand over your heart. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, I'll go ahead and open up the floor for nominations and election of the chair. Do we have any nominee?
Carmen Ramirez has been our vice chair. I'd nominate Carmen Ramirez to become our chair.
I'll second that.
We have a second.
Can we do both at the same time, vice chair and chair in one motion?
Sure. I'll nominate John Zaragoza to be the vice chair.
I'll second that.
There, yeah.
Okay,
Okay? Because we have to have city as the chair.
That's
and
right. No, you're
county as
correct.
the vice chair.
Zaragoza's good.
that works for you? Okay.
My head's spinning.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposition or abstention? Seeing none, I'll relinquish my gavel.
Well, what a surprise. Nice surprise. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. So, now, we have the minutes.
Move the approval of minutes.
Any objection? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll go on to item 6, agenda review. Consider and approve by majority vote any revisions to board items or attachments. Are there any comments by any of our board members about that?
I don't have anything to add or anything, but on item number 1, I think Mike might want to talk a bit about how it's going to work out for everyone, because it kind of bothered me at first, the cost going up for a lot of different people.
Item 1
Yes.
on,
Whoops.
Call to order.
It's the one with propane tanks.
okay, we're going to get there.
Okay.
But, okay. So what's your recommendation or
Yeah.
suggestion, Mr. Morgan?
Oh, I recommend it. I just want to ask Mike to address that one a little bit more, because it's not as dangerous as I thought it was going to be effective on people and on costs. And so he might want to address some of that about who's in favor of it and how it's going to be accomplished and so on.
This is agenda item 12, I believe.
So,
I think he's talking about item 11.
Item 11 is what I'm talking about.
shall we
okay,
take it
item
in
11.
order, or would you like to take it now?
We can take it in order. It's okay.
Let's take it in order then. Thank you, Mr. Villegas. Okay, so any other questions or comments about the agenda?
He's going to explain why it does.
Okay, so can we have a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Thank you. Public comment, item 7. This is the time set aside for the public, members of the public, to speak on matters not on the regular agenda, and each speaker may have up to 5 minutes. So I do have one speaker card from Kevin Tohill. I'm sorry. He's speaking on item 7, so I will reserve that for later. You're speaking on items. Wait, I'm sorry.
This is item 7, yeah.
Okay, let me read.
I got you
reboot
confused.
Here.
It was my fault. It was my fault.
You did mess me up, Mr. Morgan. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Tohill. Apologies. Proceed, please.
Good afternoon, board members, APC staff, and neighbors. My name is Kevin Tohill, and I live in Simi Valley next to the C.L. Barnett oil facility. I'm here today to thank Mike Villegas and Chris Frank from APC staff on the proposed revision to Rule 71 and 71.1, which would eliminate oil facilities within 300 feet of residential housing to be exempt from vapor recovery. These facilities would no longer be able to release gas vapors, VOCs, into our air supply. Linda Parks, I'd also like to thank you for setting up a meeting with APCD which you attended, and myself to help this come to reality. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank Peter Foy and your staff for coming out to the site and seeing what critical issue we're facing firsthand. Thank you. Everyone's efforts here are deeply appreciated by me and my family. APCD has a public workshop on January 21st at 2 o'clock at their district office. This workshop allows us to give feedback to these rules being revised. So please attend, and if you can't, you can send comments and your concerns to Chris Frank at APCD. I am hoping we will have a draft ready for a vote in the near future. I appreciate your support and your endorsement on this rule change. Thanks again for your help of making it a safer environment for my family and our community. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. I have no other speaker cards. Oh, we do. One more. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to Mike and your staff for all the work you're doing to try to make all this work for him and everybody else in these same kind of situations. I know it's not easy, but you guys have really stepped up to find a way to make it work, and I appreciate the nice comments for the staff here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Mr. Ron Whitehurst.
Hello, I appreciate the opportunity to address the board. I would like to suggest that the Air Pollution Control District send a letter to the San Luis Obispo County Planning Department, as the Board of Supervisors just did a couple hours ago, to oppose the development of a refinery, addition to the refinery that would allow crude oil to come in by rail. So the oil traveling along the rail lines has the potential of creating a major problem for cities, schools, government buildings, that sort of thing along the way. The oil moving by rail has increased something like 4,000% in the last 5 years. So this has been a dramatic increase in that activity. And the oil tankers carrying this toxic crude will be emitting BTEX materials, the benzene, ethyl benzene, toluene, and xylene, all along the way as they progress. And then the engines, of course, are spewing out the diesel fumes, which have their issues and such. And we need to move away from the toxic extractive industries of the past and move towards renewable energy. So I would ask the board to consider sending such a letter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask a question, Your Honor? Hello? Come back.
Mr. Whitehurst.
Yes.
I'm on the Air Quality Board with the 3 counties.
Yes.
And we've discussed this same issue.
Yes.
Because it is out of San Luis Obispo County. Sorry.
Yes.
But we never noted when we had the conversation, I was going to report that today as part of our what we discussed at our meeting, but it was never discussed where the oil was going to come from. Now,
Yes.
Do you know for sure that oil is going to pass through here, going from, Canada, down there and come back up this direction?
Yes.
Why would they do that? Just curious.
That's where the rail lines go. So in the EIR and Phillips' statements, they say that the crude oil will come from multiple sources. That particular refinery is geared up to handle heavy crude. So the Bakken crude is a lighter crude, so that probably wouldn't be a source. In the Canadian tar sands area, there has been a major increase in activity and production of this heavy crude oil there. And they have a large excess of it with no suitable pipelines to move it out of the area. And so there's talk that that crude will be heavily discounted. And so the bulk of it, as far as the economics go, look like it would be coming from the Canadian tar sands. And there's a number of railroads and rail lines, and they kind of strategically look at what's available, what lines have heavy traffic, and where the lines have been checked out to make sure that they're safe. And so any one rail oil train could come through multiple paths. So it's a pass through kind of like the Central West that comes about to the level of Los Angeles and then comes west to the coast and goes up the coast. So that for the oil trains that would be coming down that western central line, they would be coming right through the city of Ventura here, as well as the other cities along the rail track in the county, Mora Park, Camarillo, Oxnard, and so
Are there other alternatives? I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Are there other alternatives for other rail lines? I know there's one that comes through. It's not used that much by our traffic, but
Yes.
freight traffic does come from the north. It
Yes.
comes through San Jose in that
Right.
direction.
Right, that's another line. So there's a northern route that
Okay.
the oil trains could come to the San Luis Obispo refinery.
Two things. One is, if it comes through the area up there, of course, is less populated. If we restrict it to those, can we get that restricted? You think
No.
from the north, where it's less populated?
As cities and counties, we have the ability to govern things, as far as the surface activities, and that's why we are bringing this up, is that the San Luis Obispo County Planning Department has say-so about what goes on the surface of these refineries and such. So the truck traffic, the permits for expansion and that sort of thing. The rail lines are governed by the federal government, and so anything the state and lower, has no say as to how the railroad operates. They can put in a polite request, but they have no.
Could there be an
jurisdiction.
agreement? I'm sorry for taking so much time, but this is
please.
a big
Go ahead.
issue right now. And if they were to come through, all those thousands of cars full of oil, come through Simi, Moore Park, Camarillo, Ventura, you're hitting highly populated areas.
Right.
Which I would probably not be very much for, because after reading the number of
Right.
tank cars, it's kind of heavy.
Right.
And also the neighbors will be shaken up every night when it comes. Anyway,
Right.
but allowing them to come through less populated areas to an extent.
Yes.
Okay. But the other thing I have to concern myself is that it will create more.
Volatiles.
Yes,
Yes.
air pollution that will drift down south through the mountains towards Santa Barbara, according to what I heard
Right.
at the last meeting. Is that true?
Right. So as they bring in this crude, especially from the tar sands crude, it's a dirtier oil, has higher levels of some heavy metals and sulfur. And so in the process of refining it, that sulfur, would have the chance of going into the air unless, it's captured somehow. And so there's increased sulfur dioxide, which is a problem in itself. And then in the process of refining, there's this pet coke, petroleum coke, this kind of dusty residue that is a byproduct. And so that's loaded onto freight cars. So whenever there's traffic and there's more rail traffic and stuff, that coke apparently is all over the place, and so it goes into the air as well as the fumes from the processing. So that will heavily impact the neighboring communities in Nipomo. Plus, whichever way the wind blowing, it will take that pollution.
Well, it won't hit Nipomo so much because it's a northwesterly wind there. We're talking about going to the mountains. That's what the air board there talked about too.
Yeah.
So I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned about, is it dangerous to have trucks full of oil? Because they can do that too.
Right.
Without restriction.
There's problems with trucks carrying oil also. And the economics are much better, as I understand it, when you've got, the rolling freight, the rail cars that each tank car holds 30,000 gallons. And so, with the 80-car train, you can have more than 1 million gallons of crude. And so you can get a whole bunch of it in one trip. And so the economics of scale are much more favorable for rail traffic than truck traffic.
I could talk to you more about some stuff, but that's
Happy
okay.
to, yeah.
Limiting it and other restrictions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other speaker cards, so without that, we'll go ahead to board comments. We may have just had some.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just to back to that discussion, the Board of Supervisors did take action today on an item brought forward by Supervisors Parks and Bennett, whatever your name is, in that there were lots of comments submitted to the Planning Commission in San Luis Obispo on this proposal in the environmental document, of which I noted some comments that were submitted by Mike Villegas as the APCD officer to that environmental document, and some very solid points on that. So I think certainly if he wanted to speak to that or provide this board copies of what he submitted, that would answer, at least give some information as to concerns under the authority of the Air Pollution Control District.
I would appreciate that. Mr. Zaragoza?
Yeah,
and
Madam
then-
Chair,
Yes.
I agree with the speaker. This morning, we took action to share our concerns with the Planning Commission and St. Louis Obispo Planning Commission, but the concerns that we had is the impact on Ventura, Oxnard, Camarillo, Moore Park, and those areas, because they're heavily populated areas, and we'll be transporting that material right through those cities. We're talking probably over 500,000 people, so.
Mr. Tucker, did you have a comment? Did I see your hand? Mr. Pollock?
And the city of Moore Park also sent a letter opposing this project yesterday, and we had a lengthy discussion about this at our last city council meeting. And I don't want to rehash it, but just to add to the discussion that we just had in public comments, the probability of trains coming through here is pretty high. The EIR couldn't say if they'd come from the north or the south, probably a combination, but they did say that the oil trains currently, about 3 a week, go up to Taft, and they're offloaded to trucks and make the rest of the way there. With this new spur line, they would be able to take as many as 5 trains a week through Ventura County and up to that spur.
We got a letter from your mayor and also your city council, too.
Mr. Villegas, you supply that information to us?
Absolutely. I'll forward that letter to all the board members. I'll be happy to provide Mr. Whitehouse with a copy also. So.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Any other board comments?
Your Honor,
Yes.
it's not so much the number of trains, it's how many they're going to pump through there, and how long it'll interrupt the community, and the danger, the potential danger, if it does fall in those communities. That's the problem. I mean, if I were going to say 5 trains and like a mediocre little train, I wouldn't be so against it. But in this case, those showed like 100. How many was that? 100 cars, something like that.
But yeah, it's 80 cars and it's about 1.4 miles long, and that's another concern in small communities like ours. Essentially, that train stops; it effectively bisects our entire community. And if there's an emergency, we're in a lot of trouble.
Exactly.
That would be a similar effect in Oxnard as well. Okay, other comments or other board comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to item 9, which is the approval to appoint 2 Ventura County APCD board members to Air Pollution Control Board Standing Committee, and approval to appoint 1 Ventura County APCD board member as a representative to South Central Coast Basin-wide Air Pollution Control Council. So is there a motion?
I'd make a motion on the first part of that, which is to the standing committee to join members Ramirez and Zaragoza, again to try to keep it balanced, as to nominate Supervisor Parks and Councilmember Tucker.
I was thinking Supervisor Foy and Councilmember Tucker. I think it's your turn, Peter. I'll do a replacement motion and put in Mr. Tucker and Mr. Foy.
Second.
Thank you.
Let's just go back to your original.
Supervisor Parks has been on it for a number of years.
Yes. I know that you'd be stellar. Don't be afraid.
Well, you do the appointing.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I don't think I'm allowed to have Gold Coast, though. It's not in my district, but we should probably talk about that.
Not in his district.
And you're on it? Oh, wow. We'll talk about that later.
No, he's talking about the other Gold Coast, the medical.
Oh, the medical. I thought you were talking transportation.
I'm bargaining up here. Got a motion on there.
I think it's a motion for those two.
So it's the chair, vice chair, and who?
Well, there's a replacement motion that's
Yes.
been made.
Replacement motion.
Let's do a replacement on replacement to go back to the original motion.
No such thing.
Now the chair has to work that out.
Okay, so how do we proceed
You
here?
asked for a motion on the replacement motion.
Is there a motion to support the replacement motion?
It's not going to sit here. I can do that, right, County?
Question mark over his
I'll
head.
tell you what, I'm going to make it simple. I'll withdraw my motion, so we only have one motion out here. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
I'll
So,
make a replacement motion on that.
Let's move
Only
on
if you get a
this.
second.
So who, who's
Go ahead,
on?
Linda.
I'm lost.
Okay, so the motion then, since he retracted his, is to appoint a board member Tucker and board member Foy to the standing committee.
Second.
Thank you.
There's no payback
The train
here.
came through.
All those, okay, we're gonna have the vote now. All those in favor? Aye.
The chair and the vice chair included, of course.
So I'm not sure where.
Then you would've
I'm
got
not sure what the
appointed
count was. Let's have that again, because
There was only one no.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, one opposed. The motion passes. Sorry about that. It's actually a lot of fun, and sometimes you get lunch.
You've been railroaded.
Okay, on to,
South Coast Basin Road.
Madam Chair?
yes.
With regards to the second component, Mike Vegas has done a great job for the board, so I'd like to nominate him to continue to serve in that role. Mike Morgan, I'm sorry. Mike Vegas also has done a great job, but
Two Mikes.
Mike Morgan.
All right,
You know, it's a half a day work, but you know what?
Second.
We have fun at it.
you do a good job.
I think we try to do a balance on the boards up there.
All right, all those in favor, is there a motion?
Aye.
There's a motion.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? No.
Who was that?
Motion carries.
I was.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morgan, for your service. Remember Morgan. Okay, we're on to
Now, which one?
approval of Ventura County Air Pollution Control District rule development for this year. Mr. Villegas.
Chair Ramirez, members of the board, Happy New Year. And this is a state requirement that basically says air districts need to provide the community, especially the regulated community, with a list of all the possible rules that could come before your board during the upcoming year. And we publish this list every January. I'd like to point out we do have Rule 71.1, crude oil production and separation, on the list. It's a high priority. You heard from the citizens in Simi Valley on the Barnett Field, and we're moving very quickly on this, aggressively. We asked for expedited review from our oversight agencies. Basically, just look at what we're doing, not the entire rule, because the rule is somewhat older. And we did receive no comment letters, both from the United States EPA and the California Air Resources Board. So the schedule is to workshop this rule on the 21st of this month, advisory committee February 28th, your board April 14th. And in rulemaking, that's just as fast as it goes.
Mr. Morgan.
I love this. You get a calendar, it says calendars, dates and things, and it says TBD and TBD in almost all of them. To be determined in the future. Yep.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Exactly.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Next item, Mr. Villegas, is that yours as well?
I'm going to introduce our rule engineer, Stan Cowan. He's going to give you the presentation on this rule, but I want you to know one thing. Staff has worked diligently to make sure that we've worked this rule out with industry. And at this point in time, we have not received any adverse comments. We worked closely with the industry groups. And this rule is 100 tons per year of reactive organic compound reduction, and it's cost effective. With that, I'll turn it over to Stan.
This is what
Thank
I was
you.
talking about.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair
Thank you
Ramirez,
very
members
much.
of the board, Stan Cowan, Air Quality Engineer. Mike, we'll get to your question, have a short presentation, and then we'll answer any questions you have. This is a proposed new rule, 7433, liquefied petroleum gas transfer or dispensing. And LPG, or liquefied petroleum gas, is just another name for propane. And this rule is basically what's called an all-feasible measure, which is required by state law under the California Clean Air Act. And the ARB defines an all-feasible measure as something that has been successfully implemented in other regions. And this rule is basically based on the South Coast Rule 1177. Okay. I have a short presentation. We'll talk about the emission sources. We're not talking about combustion of propane. We're talking about the transfer from one tank to another. The background, I said, it's based on South Coast Rule 1177, which was adopted in 2012 and has been successfully implemented down there. It's also based on the National Fire Protection Association Code 58, which, as you know, propane is highly flammable, and these are safety provisions. I'll talk about the proposed rule requirements, which match the South Coast Rule identically, except we have less reporting requirements. And then the exemptions, there are some exemptions that come straight from the South Coast Rule for smaller tanks and for recreational vehicles. The emission reductions and costs, as Mike said, this is a significant source of ROC emissions. ROC emissions are precursors to ozone. We're non-attainment for ozone. We have over 100 tons per year emission reductions estimated. And the costs are very reasonable, under $1 per pound of ROC reduced. And then I'll summarize. Okay, first, the emission sources. Propane is almost everywhere in the county. There are many sources. Forklifts is a very popular use of propane in a lot of different companies. Residential furnaces, for those off the natural gas grid, a lot of them use propane for their heaters. Barbecue tank filling, these are the small 5-gallon cylinders. One important point is that the exchange program, when you go to your Vons or whatever, Home Depot, those programs are unaffected by this proposal. So those will just continue as the same. Ag operations, they use propane for wind machines, flame weed control, and standby generators. Oil field service is another fairly large use. These portable tank degassing rigs, there's probably 45 of them. They are permitted by the district. Also, portable asphalt batch plants. So these are basically trucks that use propane to heat the process. And then obviously, there are a number of bulk plants in the county, about 5 of them. These are your large storage areas. It's defined in the rule as having a tank greater than 10,000 gallons. And then there are a number of what we call LPG or propane dispensing facilities. These are your retail outlets where you can get your barbecue cylinder refilled or so forth at service stations. There's about 30 of those in the county. The rule focuses on 2 main components in the transfer process. And there's two types. One is called fixed liquid level gauges, and these are basically to prevent overfilling of the tanks. There's a valve they open, and the gas escapes through an orifice on the valve. And the other one is the transfer connections. So those are the valves and coupling. So those are the basic 2 components. And what the rule does is requires the use of low emission versions of those components. As I said, the rule is based on the South Coast Rule 1177, which was recently adopted. As Mike said, the South Coast worked very closely, and we did as well, with the industry association and with the local members of that industry, on the propane industry. They had 7 working group meetings and 13 site visits. The name of the association is the Western Propane Gas Association, and they attended all of our meetings. And they basically worked out the rule with the South Coast, and then they didn't have any opposition to what we're proposing. Reducing these, what are called fugitive emissions or transfer emissions, will result in the capture of propane, which so you're not losing as much product, which results in a cost savings actually, and then there's a safety benefit because it's a flammable gas. And then, as I said, they require the use of the low emission valves and gauges. And the proposed rule requirements, as I said earlier, it's basically the same as the South Coast rule, except there are fewer reporting requirements. Our reports are only required by the five bulk plants, the largest facilities, and a lot of them are already in compliance with the rule because they've been retrofitting these parts based on a rebate program the industry association has sponsored that paid for 75% of the cost of these components, and they had a budget of over $150,000 a year to get industry to. Basically, they were doing this themselves, and what this rule does is it just accelerates that process. Let's see. So yeah, we're talking about same components. I'm going to talk a little bit more closely about some components in a minute to kind of give you a little bit better feeling for it. Another new requirement is a leak detection repair program at the bulk plants and at the transfer facilities. What this is a physical inspection daily, and then a quarterly inspection using either soap bubbles or an analyzer. And then if they find a leak, then they need to tag the component and repair it before they put it back into service. We've minimized the admin requirements associated with the rule. Almost none of these sources currently have APCD permits, and that is going to remain the case. So there's no new permits, but there are some existing permit holders, in particular the oil field tanker truck loading operations, and those will remain on permit. So there's no change to Rule 23. So that should keep some of the admin costs down. There are new record-keeping requirements for the LPG transfer facilities, but these are based on existing purchase records, so there's no new record-keeping. They just need to organize their existing records that they already have to show compliance. And then here's kind of a picture, a photograph of what the fixed liquid level gauge looks like. It has a dip tube with a control valve. You can see the orifice on the right, and what the rule requires is a smaller gauge orifice, basically a 0.025 inch versus 0.055 inch. And this actually has a pretty significant reduction in emissions. Based on an industry study done by the Battelle Institute in 2009, vapor emissions decreased 76%, and liquid emissions decreased by 58 to 60%. And this was sponsored by an industry-sponsored study. And then here's another give you kind of a more concrete feeling for what these parts look like. This is one of the vendors for the bleed fill valves, Squibb Taylor. And you can see the photograph at the top. The low emission part is the one on the left. You can see the emissions coming off the photograph on the right. It's 102 cc's of vented liquid versus 7.6 cc's. So it's over 90% control. So there's really a good case to be made for having these newer low emission components. And the same is true for the smaller tank, though it's not as big an emission reduction. So, and exemptions, as I mentioned, these are from the South Coast rule. If the tanks are less than 4 gallons water capacity, and also recreational vehicles if they're installed. If they're not installed, then they are subject to the rule, such as the 20-pound, 5-gallon containers, or if it's a propane-powered truck, then that would also be subject to the regulation. The rule has an exemption for the oil field LPG truck, tanker truck loading operations, because these are already subject to existing rules, 71.3 transfer rule, which is a similar rule to this one, and 7410, which is our oil field fugitive rule, which has a leak detection program in it. And then as part of my research, I went out to Era Energy's Ventura facility and observed a tanker truck being loaded, and they did it using primary and secondary overfill protection and nitrogen purge system, and it was very, very clean, very little emissions coming from that operation. So that's the reason we can do this exemption, because they're already being regulated. And the emission reduction is cost effectiveness. It's a significant source. We don't normally get a source over 100 tons per year very often, which is the reason that we're doing it now. And cost effectiveness was estimated about 85 cents per pound of ROC reduced, but this does not consider the product savings of the propane that's captured. And this is inexpensive compared to new sources that are typically required to spend as much as $9 per pound. So it's very, very cost effective. And in summary, it says a significant source of emissions. It's an all feasible measure as defined by state law for non-attainment areas under the California Clean Air Act. It's feasible and reasonable. These parts are off the shelf, and it's cost effective at under $1 per pound. There's no new permits required, so administrative costs are minimized. And then we had a unanimous recommendation from our advisory committee. And those are the extent of my remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Appreciate your time. Yeah.
Now that we're there, I was worried about the farmers. We already got the recreational vehicles are exempt. That's out of it. Bulk plants and distribution centers, you've talked to them and they're all set. They're ready. They're supporting this, correct? Right. That's good. Farmers are the other ones I'm concerned with because there are a lot of propane used in the fields, especially on generators, wind generators and things. Is it just that device that they buy and put on this thing and that's it?
Yeah, it's just a small part that they use to connect the tank from one to the other when they do the transfer.
Okay.
It's the fill valve, basically.
So it's nothing that's a super financially hindering them any.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can just ask, just for clarification purposes,
sure.
The 85 cents or $1,700, it looked like a year, that's generally a one-time fee, or is there recurring fees once everything is switched over?
Well, that's the amortized cost.
Okay. So generally a one-time, it's not going to be year after year?
Right, right.
Other questions? Okay.
You want to move the approval of staff's recommendation?
Second.
Oh, we have public hearing. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We do have public hearing.
Well, this is a public hearing. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak? I have no speaker cards on this item. Seeing none, we'll proceed.
Move the approval of staff recommendation.
Move. Do we have to open and close the public hearing? I'm having trouble with my script here. Okay. So, is there a motion to close? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. No. Anyone opposed? No.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before you go on to the next agenda item, I just wanted to very quickly interject. I know we had some fun with the appointment there, but Supervisor Foy voted no, and I want to be sensitive to that. I'd be happy to serve on that, so we'd have to make a motion to reconsider. But so I'd be happy to be the other supervisor to serve there. I'm here and all of that kind of stuff on that. So
well, let's take that up after we finish this item because we haven't quite finished it. I'm happy to pull it back. So, was there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Morgan, second. Mr. Tucker, Mr. Zaragoza. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion item is passed. So let's go back and review standing committee issue. A motion to reconsider. Is there a second? Okay.
you made the motion to reconsider, didn't you? I just thought I heard Supervisor Parks.
Supervisor Parks made a motion to reconsider.
All right.
I don't know who made the second. Supervisor Zaragoza. All in favor? Motion. No. Oh dear. Here we go. We're going to be trying this.
I'll move to appoint
Okay.
And I think you have to go with Councilmember Tucker also because we've revised the old motion.
Okay. So that motion is
okay.
redone.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Any opposed?
No. All right. Passes unanimously. Let's go back to our agenda item. Thank you very much. That's nice. Yeah. Duly noted. Tiskin over here. That's how you say it. Okay. Item 12. Approval of and authorization for the Air Pollution Control Officer to execute a memorandum of agreement with the Department of Conservation, Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources and the California Air Resources Board regarding well stimulation activities. Mr. Villegas.
September of 2013, the governor signed Senate Bill 4, Oil Well Stimulation Activities. SB 4 requires the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, known as DOGGR, to enter into agreements with the California Air Resources Board and any air district where these well stimulation activities occur. Over the past several months, DOGGR, the Air Resources Board, and local air districts represented by myself, the engineering manager from San Joaquin, and general counsel from the South Coast District have negotiated an MOA. The MOA that's before you has 4 major components related to the air districts. First, the air districts would be given the opportunity to review the well stimulation permits that are going to be issued via DOGGR. And we'd be looking for information related to air quality compliance issues. Next, DOGGR, Air Resources Board, and the air districts, we would cross-train our inspection staff to make sure that we do a better job of field work, especially checking for other agencies' compliance issues. In other words, we would be trained to look for issues that would require compliance under DOGGR's permit. We would also have to notify DOGGR of any potential violations of their permit that we find after we've been cross-trained. And lastly, if an air district were to issue a notice of violation regarding well stimulation activities, which is hydraulic fracturing or acidization, we would have to provide a copy of that NOV to DOGGR. The MOA before your board meets the requirements of SB4, and I'm urging you to sign it. Allow me to sign that to execute that agreement. There is a letter from Western States Petroleum Association, and they're concerned. I spoke with them at length this morning. Their concern is that there's a 45-day review period for the districts looking at the proposed DOGGR permits. And they are hoping for something more along the lines of 14 days. I've requested a copy of one of the well stimulation permits that were actually issued here in Ventura County last year. I have not received a copy of that permit yet from DOGGR. Once we do that, I would be comfortable coming back to your board and letting you know about how long it's actually going to take us to review that permit. I think once we do a couple initial permits, we're going to move fairly quickly in this. Our number one goal is environmental protection, but our district also prides herself in this customer service we provide to our permittees. So I've actually asked DOGGR, there's language in the MOA that alludes to perhaps an outside agreement outside of the MOA that would allow us to commit to something shorter than 45 days. I'd like to point out also that our engineering manager is an ex-oil field engineer. Our permit processing specialist used to be the air quality coordinator for Veneco Incorporated. We're just deep in this type of knowledge.
Supervisor Bennett.
But you want to start with 45 until you know.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's important is this MOA is going to be identical through all the air districts except San Joaquin, who went ahead and signed at 14 days. And so I'm kind of representing the rest of the air districts here. So,
Mr. Morgan.
I appreciate you wanting to do it quickly, but I agree you should start off with a longer period.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I feel the same way. We'll get a report after a certain period of time on what the average time is, because I don't want that 45 days going that much further.
It can't exceed 45 days.
I know,
but I believe we can do it.
You kind of keep us up with that?
Absolutely. I'll report back.
Okay.
Mr. Morgan, you'll let us, Mr. Villegas, you'll let us know if there's a resource issue in terms of staffing, and we don't know how many permits might be.
We have a handle on that. I spoke with our local DOGGR representatives. There were 4 well stimulation permits pulled during 2014, and 3 of them were they actually did the well stimulation. So it's not going to be a big burden on us at all. Especially you got to consider now oil went from 107 to 48, so a barrel. So I would expect a slowdown.
Okay. I have no public comment cards on this. What's the pleasure of the board?
Second.
So,
I concur, but can we get maybe a presumed date that she can come back and tell us how it's worked?
That's going to depend on when that next stimulation permit's pulled in this county.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, right now it's happening infrequently, and I don't know what to expect in 2015, but I'll report to you as soon as we've reviewed one of these permits.
Okay, so we can see if we can reduce that time.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Call for the question here. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. On to item 13, receive and file study session regarding emerging air quality issues. Mr. Villegas?
Yes, we're taking a little longer today than I expected, and if you would like, I could drop down to the one real timely issue and bring the other two back, or we can do all three, whatever the board chooses.
Proceed, please.
I guess I'm doing all three. First up, you received my email regarding the proposed new federal ozone standards. Also, I'm going to talk to you about this proliferation of these personal air quality monitors. And there's major changes afoot with the district's air toxics program based on some new state guidelines. The current federal ozone standard is 75 parts per billion averaged over 8 hours. And we went over this in my ozone air quality session last summer. EPA has proposed a standard in the range of 65 to 70 parts per billion. And under court order, they're required to finalize this proposal by October 1st of this year. Both of these standards are based on what's called the design value. They don't look at the number of days over the standard. What they do is they look at a year, and you look at your fourth highest day, and then they average it over 3 years. So for 2014, we'd look at our fourth highest day in 14, 13, and 12, average those three numbers, and our current design value is 79 parts per billion, which is obviously greater than 75. And what you see with the two lines at 70 and 65 is you can see the range where EPA is proposing to go with this new standard. I would like to point out that the independent science committee that looks only at the health impacts proposed a range of 70 to 60. However, EPA scientists felt that there's a lot of uncertainty on the health effects as you near 60 parts per billion. As you can see, we're on pace to attain the 75 part per billion standard. Under federal law, we have a deadline of 2021 for that standard, and the air quality management plan that will demonstrate our compliance with that is due to EPA in 2016. You can see that the new standards are going to be considerably more challenging for us. With this new standard, what we're going to see is EPA will make designations in 2017, and obviously Ventura County will once again be non-attainment. It just depends on where they're going to classify us. For the new standard, plans are going to be due in 2020-2021 timeframe. Now, interesting, if we were classified serious, we would have an attainment deadline of 2026. If we're severe, we would have till 2032. We were severe non-attainment area for the original 120 part per billion ozone standard, and our rules are set there. So if we actually opted to be severe, there would be no adverse impact to local businesses because our rules are already set at the severe level. The benefits to being severe are, one, you get more time to achieve the standard, and it's going to be more difficult in the future. Next, your piece of federal funding, that piece of the pie, is larger as a severe agency versus a serious classified agency. And lastly, under the state programs, you'd receive more funding under Carl Moyer as a severe area than a serious area. So we'd be able to replace more diesel engines more aggressively, being classified as severe. And the last benefit to that federal funding is it does provide less impact on local businesses because you're going to be running this agency with more federal funding and less of an increase in your permit fees. So those are just things to think about as we move forward with this. But it is it's going to be quite a challenge for us to attain this standard.
Wow. Yes.
Michael, so under severe, what's happening to our people with under severe?
Nothing. The air isn't any different. It's just a legal classification on when we would have to meet the deadline. And the downside is, from a political standpoint, members in the community would say it would be better to achieve it in 2026. Now, the modeling is going to tell us whether or not that's achievable in 2026 or not.
So to attain our compliance, we're in the severe mode.
We may have to be. If they go to 65, I would bet that we'd have to be severe.
Okay. So that gives us more money to work with the...
Absolutely.
Okay.
What is going to be the primary thing we need to do to bring it down and to meet their goals?
It's going to come from state and federal measures, because that rule you just approved, that 100 tons per year of RLC, we're probably not going to see stationary source rule actions achieving that level of reduction in the future. We're looking at our boiler rules, we're looking at going back into our oil field rules, but they're going to be incremental steps forward. We're really looking for improvement in mobile sources, motor vehicles, although the lion's share of those have already been achieved. So it's locomotives, ships, aircraft. We're going after all the diesel engines in the agriculture community via our incentive programs and the Carl Moyer program. So it's something your board and I are going to have to think about, whether or not we want to be severe or serious. But the bottom line is, under state law, once you're severe, you can't relax your rules. So we're locked in with permitting thresholds for a severe area under state law. So there's, like I said, there's no...
So it hurts us in the sense of bringing new business in because we get real that severe, but helps us in the other sense we get more money to help these diesel transition and all that stuff change.
That's correct.
Yes, Mr. Sharp.
Yeah, Mr. Villegas, do we self-designate as severe, or is that tied to some metric?
Well, the way EPA does it, and it's an unfortunate metric, is they look at how high above the standard you are, and they decide if you're marginal, moderate, serious, severe, extreme.
So it's not us doing it?
No.
Okay.
We're allowed to request a bump up. And the thing is, when EPA looks at some rural county in Georgia and says they're above the standard as much as us, they may have never been non-attainment. So they can go in and put vapor recovery on their gas stations, control their power plant, and make it easily. In California, we've done all that. So we need time for technology to advance for mobile sources.
Yeah. Mr. Morgan, did you have?
I had one because I learned this morning from one of our transit people, a roadrunner, that they're intending to put in a what do you call it? Not gas station, everything, CNG and hydrogen station there in Camarillo. They've already got the spot there next to the freeway and everything. If they do put that in, and people know where it is because you have a sign on the freeway saying, here, you can get your hydrogen, you can get this or that, because right now there's not that many places right next to the freeway where they can stop. Will that help us reduce it, get credit for that kind of thing?
It will, because when I talked about motor vehicles in that study session last year, I pointed out that fuel cell vehicles are basically, that's what the Air Resources is banking on out in 2025 to 2050. So the hydrogen highway and efforts to bring those facilities throughout California, especially the non-attainment areas, is going to be critical.
This will be the first one in Ventura County.
Yes.
Was that part of Governor Brown's 50% in 2020 or 30 or whatever?
It could be. And that hydrogen highway, that was really Governor Schwarzenegger's
Yeah, I remember that
program.
big truck. He drove very slow.
Other comments? Have you finished with your presentation? No.
Got 2 more items to go. First off, personal air quality sensors. They're on the market now, and they run anywhere from a couple $100 to several thousand.
Yeah.
And basically, they interface with your smartphone, Android or iPhone. And we've seen studies, environmental groups in some large cities are already utilizing them and creating data sets of this information. Most of them are for particulate matter, a few are for ozone, and just in its infancy are other pollutants. The issue is data quality varies widely. One of our particulate monitors that meets the federal requirements is $15,000. These are in the neighborhood of $200. So you could see that there could be reliability issues. The other concern is this, and it's shared by many other air districts, is what about my air quality? We have a monitoring network that's designed to show whether or not we're in attainment with federal and state air quality standards. And pursuant to EPA regulations, we have to site our stations in specific locations, away from freeways, away from hills, away from trees. Now, and someone looks at our particulate matter data that shows the county's in attainment, and they've got their monitor right next to the 101, they're going to get a very different result. And they're going to question the air quality data that we're producing. So one of the things we're going to do to react is we're working with the South Coast District, and my monitoring manager and myself met with them for a full day, and they're actually going to hire 2.5 staff to review these personal sensors. And they're going to do a study on which ones are reliable and which ones aren't. We are considering acquiring a few of these from two standpoints. We could use them during wildfires if we had a power outage that affected one of our monitoring, and that did happen once in the Piru area. So our particulate sampler went down right in the middle of an air quality episode. This would give us a backup. The other thing we consider is actually, if we find reliable units, we could loan them to people that are interested in utilizing them and at least be assured of reasonable data. The other thing, if we took that lending library approach, we actually might receive federal funding to purchase these monitors. So that's really how I'm thinking of dealing with it. The bottom line is, whether I like it or not, this technology is coming down the road like a train, and I'd rather be on it than under it. So I'm trying to be proactive.
I like to, we addressed this in our Tri-County thing, and there's somebody from San Luis Obispo, I think it was, presenting this. And Mike and I don't disagree on a lot of things, but this one I did. How many are going to want to measure out? Oh, let's see, what's the air quality now around me? How many are going to buy these things, honestly? And where are they going to be standing to measure these things?
The people with asthma or health issues in their family.
You know, they don't want to go near a freeway then, because that's where it's going to be the highest.
And then use apps.
Oh, apps.
They do. And in some major cities, San Francisco, the Bay Area being one of them, because of the refineries, they're seeing in the Bay Area a proliferation of these units. I have one more topic, and it's the one that is probably the most important right now. I'm going to give you some background on the district's air quality program related to toxics. First, in California, since 1990, we've seen about an 80% decrease in air toxic risk. And it's driven by programs that the air districts and the Air Resources Board have implemented. We've got a very mature program. In 1987, there was the Air Toxics Hotspot Act, and it basically had two requirements. It says in air district you had to look over all of these facilities based on a priority and notify the public of any facility with significant risk, and further, that facility had to implement a plan to reduce that risk below the level of significance, which was set by your board at a risk of 10 in a million for cancer. And that is the most common level throughout California. I'm happy to report to you that of all the facilities in Ventura County that once had significant risk, under this program, we have no longer any facilities that pose a significant risk. What the state is working on is the guidelines that provide the science and underlying very conservative assumptions that we use when we do a health risk assessment. This was driven by the Children's Health Protection Act of 1999, which basically told the state that they needed to update their guidelines because they were based on this average life expectancy, average breathing rate for an adult, basically looking at adults. And as the state worked through this, they changed some of the assumptions were going to be used in our computer models. First, they look at age sensitivity factors. And bottom line, because of the growth rates of infants and young children, they're more susceptible to cancer-causing chemicals. And they looked at the fetus in the third trimester, ages 0 to 2 and 2 to 16. And bottom line, with the new assumptions going into our computer models, we're going to see a significant increase in the calculated risk from the same exact facility with the same emissions when we run this in 2015 versus 2014 under the new program. The other thing they looked at was breathing rate assumptions. And bottom line, kids move around more than adults and they breathe more per pound of body mass. It gives them a higher exposure rate. They also looked at the frequency of time at home, and there were assumptions, very conservative, that said people were at home 100% of the time, and now it's in a range from 85 to 72 based on your age, with young children being home a significant portion of time. They also looked at exposure duration. Before, the residential risk was based on a 70-year exposure, which was a little too conservative. They're dropping it to 30. They're also dropping workplace exposure from 40 to 25. These two items will actually decrease the calculated risk, but they will not offset the significant increases we saw in daily breathing rates or age sensitivity factors. The other assumption that's going to change is we used to calculate our emissions. Say there was a service station right next to a residential home. We calculated the risk at the highest point on that residential property, and we assumed that the person stayed there for the entire duration of exposure, and it was called the porch potato assumption. Now, with computers being so much quicker, we can do multiple runs, and we can actually calculate the risk on that residential property in a grid and average it, and that leads to a fairly significant decrease in calculated risk. But the bottom line is we're still going to see an overall increase when we calculate risk. We're working with Santa Barbara, San Luis County, and Monterey Bay on permitting issues because at 10 in a million and 100 in a million, there's thresholds on issuing permits. We're also looking at updating our air toxic hotspots program, which I briefed you on, and then CEQA, because part of our mission is to review environmental impact reports for not just air quality, but air toxics issues. We're also working with CAPCOA and the Air Resources Board on how to communicate this to the public, because bottom line, we are going to have to tell the public that the risk from that facility we told you was under 10 in a million before might not be with the new assumptions. And that's not going to be easy to do. And of course, then I have to deal with any increased impacts on our staffing related to this more refined toxics program. And that kind of leads to my next item on the board. That's all I have. I'll be happy to take questions.
Other comments? Anybody? Thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, we're just receiving and filing that, so we'll go on now to item 14. Adoption of resolution approving deletion of one vacant position, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Currently, we have a vacancy in our planning division for an air quality specialist 2. And we've reviewed it, and we do not need to fill it at this time or for the foreseeable future. However, in our engineering division, I just told you about increased workload in our toxics program. We've got a new power plant application coming, and we've got some interesting waste to energy project proposals that it could take up significant amount of our engineers' time. So what we're proposing to do is delete that vacant air quality specialist 2, create a permit processing specialist 1 position, which has a slightly reduced salary cap, and that'll lead to a little bit of cost savings for the district. Not real significant, but we're also proposing to do an internal recruitment, and we're going to review that position, the one that's vacated, to see if we actually need to fill it, and I may come back to your board with additional salary savings in the future. Bottom line, at a minimum, we're going to get some modest salary savings out of this proposal. Your board standing committee unanimously recommended this at their December meeting.
So we need to, is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Any further comments? None? So let's have the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, so that's approved. And our final item, thank you, Mr. Villegas. Final item is receive and file minutes of South Central Coast Basin-wide Air Pollution Control Council meeting of September 17th, 2014.
That's just a receive and file.
Right. Any comments, questions? None? All right, that looks like the last item on our agenda, so we'll stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Happy New Year.
Real quickly, I'll let you know that we didn't cancel the February meeting because I thought we were going to come back with the building contract. It looks like that's March, so we probably will not meet in February. But the standing committee needs to meet in March anyhow for the budget kickoff. So.
Okay.
By the way, before you leave, Mike and I attended that meeting up there, and you heard about last time about the sand that they were complaining about, maybe shutting down Pismo Beach at one time or trying to, the beach out there. Well, they reached a compromise, realizing, I think the bunch was talking, that can you just shut that down and hurt the economy of Pismo Beach, period? Because that's a lot of their activity is recreation out there. So they've come through with the state rec district to do some fencing and some areas that, what is that called? It lays out something over the sand in some areas. I forgot what it was called.
Basically, they're going to reduce some of the riding areas and put in some wind fences.
Exactly. And that will help keep, hopefully, I don't think so, but sand from going into the fields, but that's been doing it for centuries. Yes. So, anyway, there it is.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.